leading us kind of interestingly to our interview today. Tim Bezbatchenko is the general manager of Toronto FC, and he speaks for soccer in basically Toronto. The MLS, the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Group, owns that franchise, but they also own the Raptors and Air Canada Centre and a lot of the other venues in Toronto. And the interesting thing about that, too, is that team competes for the MLS Cup this week. So you're talking about putting a great team on the field and a great team in the boardroom. Tim and I shared some time at the Primetime Sports Conference 2 weeks ago, and you have the benefit of his insights. Tim Bezbatchenko. Senior Vice President, Toronto FC. You do everything relating to Toronto FC. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Bez from now on, right? Is
you just call me Bez. It's much easier.
So give us the state generally of the MLS, broadly defined.
Good question. So the league has experienced exponential growth in the last really 10 years, but even more so in the last few years. We're still in expansion mode. So we had two new teams this year. LAFC comes in next year. This year it was Atlanta. It was a story of Atlanta with 71,000 in their Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Arthur Blank shares with the Falcons, as well as Minnesota. And so they've just announced that it looks like Miami with David Beckham is coming in a few years. Like I said, LAFC, and they're going to announce another round of expansion. So explosive growth, but even on the player side, on the front office side of things, what I've noticed is the calls I receive for players who are interested in coming into the league has also grown. So there's an awareness, and I think that comes with a lot having to do with the broadcast deals internationally. So the league has grown from my time at the league when there was only 10 teams when I was working there to now when they're 22 and we're going to grow to 28. It's really an exciting time, but I really do think it reflects the broadcast, but the product on the field. It's just getting better and better each year.
Well, and frankly, you have a great perspective from which to analyze that. You were a all-world player at Richmond, and then you were at the USL. And
I'm not sure I called it all-world, but I held my own.
Let me describe the resume the way I want to.
Okay,
But you certainly were very important in college soccer, and then the USL, the second league here. So you cover the waterfront, league office, and now you're kind of shepherding a team in the largest city in Canada. Different skills, translated skills. What's the commonality?
Yeah. I think for me it's a blend, right? And I dip into each of the tools every day. Being a lawyer, former lawyer, in terms of being process oriented. I think especially in our league where we don't have the highest salary caps around the world. In fact, we're one of the few, if not the only league that has one. We have to be creative, and we actually have to turn someone who might be maybe paid millions around the world and have them agree to come to our league and get paid less. So you have to be process oriented, which is what my legal background comes into play. Obviously, I had to have played the game, and so to work in the game, you either play or you really are passionate about it. Especially again with our league that's growing, and so and then obviously having worked in the league office, the relationships from the league office, but also how it worked. Our single entity structure, which is a single ownership of all the league, is unique, and the rules and regulations are different because of that. So depending on the day, I got to dip into each bucket, but it's helpful to have all those experiences.
Ownership groups, some are independent, some are just soccer oriented. You guys in this situation here have a relationship with a lot of the big, if not all of the big sports franchises in town. And so how does that all work? Model clearly group ownership of all of the franchises, but as you're in Toronto, as you sit here today, would you rather have a franchise owner that only deals with soccer, or would you rather have the vertically integrated structure that you found yourself?
The integrated structure is a competitive advantage, not just because it's more enjoyable because I like basketball and hockey, but because the ability to learn from each other is second to none. So when I was at the league office and I got recruited to come up to Toronto, one, I didn't know how incredible of a city it was. So when I came up here in September, it truly is world class. But two, to work at MLSE, where you can share thoughts and ideas with Shanny and Kyle Dubas with the hockey team, certainly with Masai and Bobby, and at the time Jeff Weltman with the Raptors is unique. And in our league, there's only a few teams that have sort of sister teams. And for me, that was a game changer. And for example, we just got free agency 2 years ago, and because it was new to our league, I tapped into the knowledge of Masai and asked them some tricks of the trade, and we used that, and it helped us sign Drew Moore, one of our standout defenders the last couple of years.
Down south we're all lamenting about the U.S. not making the World Cup, and so I'm sure there is a perspective up here about that. What's your perspective about that?
Yeah, it's so deep and complicated. I don't think that there's one issue. The one thing I would say is it's not a result of just the loss against Trinidad, right? It is something that spans, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, from building a roster that was deep enough to withstand the rigors of CONCACAF competition, but also creating an identity so that when other teams come play us at home, where you must win or at least get a result, you can't lose those games, but you have the identity to get you over the top. So, we could talk all day and sit here and talk about the developmental structure, but I think we're only going up. We have a robust sort of second division, which is when I played in the league back in sort of the early 2000s, there was no movement of players up and down. Now, there's a lot of movement between the second division and the first division, which is fantastic for player development. So players know that are coming up through the academy system or out of college, hey, I'm going to cut my teeth in the USL, learn how to be a pro, and then I'm going to step up. That's only going to help our game, and that's going to help the national team be successful, whether or not you're in Canada or the US, both countries. Both countries
as it relates to the World Cup next year and then Qatar 4 years later. Is it let's survive and thrive notwithstanding? Is that part of the whole strategy?
Right now I think it's an opportunity now that it hasn't, obviously we're not making the World Cup, but it's an opportunity now to look toward the next World Cup, which is in Qatar, which frankly we should have been hosting, at least in North America in the first place. But there's an opportunity, one, because we can have a longer outlook on things. Being as a general manager, you're always keeping your eye on Saturday, but also Saturday 3 years from now. For the national teams now, you're really starting to look at 5 years from now, and how can you place yourself in a position where you can qualify but also have success at the tournament. And I think both Canada and the U.S. both have to look at having success in the tournament, not just qualifying.
Who'd have thought years ago that franchises would be going for $150 million and more if Don Garber gets his way for the next round of expansion? Where does this go, and are we thinking in the same breath, quality-wise, of Premier League and La Liga, Bundesliga, et cetera?
Why not? I think that our ownership is world class, right? A lot of these owners own NFL teams, basketball teams. There's no reason to think that we can't dream and put into place initiatives that'll get us on par with those other leagues. Now, are we there right now? No, but I think through initiatives of the league and being smart with our spending on product quality on the pitch, we can get there. The designated player rule helps. The new targeted allocation money rule helps in terms of categories of players. But the one thing we have going for us is that almost every player I've met in the world is very intrigued about MLS and they want to live in North America. Our quality of life is really second to none. Not bragging about our countries, but it is an incredible place to live. And so you put that together, and then you talk about ability to transcend your sport. You can really only do that in North America in terms of being able to experience other sporting opportunities and being bigger than just an athlete and having a career after the sport. I think that's what MLS provides to soccer players around the world that other clubs can't provide.
NBC, tip of the spear, leading our weekend viewing, focusing on Premier League, and then Fox taking it over. Not taking it over, but also being part of that whole market share. Good for MLS, good for the sport, that we as Americans and North Americans can see how beautiful the game is live on weekends, or is it an opportunity to see how different the quality is?
I think 10 years ago, sort of the case of high tide raises all boats, but I think now we're at a position where we need to be independent from the other sports leagues, and we need to showcase our sport in our two countries. And so I think what we've learned from the NBC sort of on Saturday, Sunday mornings is that the importance of having a designated time for MLS soccer to be on during the weekend or the week, right? People have to start to carve their life around MLS, not just soccer, but around MLS, right? You have NFL at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Everyone knows that. And so we need to start finding our place within the broadcasting community where people know the game's going to be on. It's going to be a good show and good product, entertaining soccer. And I think that's what we've learned from sort of the other soccer that we're dealing with on a weekly basis.
Where's the League A and soccer in North America be 5 years from now?
Wow, not a Seuss there, but I do think that we've We are regularly competing from an attendance standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, and frankly from a player standpoint with some of the leagues, the French league, certainly in Holland. I think our first competing league that we need to show that we can beat on a regular basis is Mexico. Their salary caps are around $30 to $50 million. Ours are really 10 to 20 on the high end. So it's not just about player spend. We've shown that we can compete from a soccer standpoint with leagues that are quadruple what we're spending, but at some point it does come down to competition. And so what we want to do over the next 5 years is we're going to be competing and winning CONCACAF Champions League. We want to be competing on the Club World Cup, and I think it behooves clubs like us at Toronto FC and a few other clubs that are leading the way in MLS to get to those competitions and to win them.
The guy started with Richmond soccer, then he's USL and league office. Here